We have another sign that the 2024-2025 Islanders season is getting closer. The team has released their preliminary training camp roster, and there are a few surprises. We've got that and a lot more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Lots to discuss on today's show. But first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, send us an email to lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long during the offseason. That includes hirings, firings, trade rumors, free agency, and the draft. If it's happening to the New York Islanders, we'll have it for you here on the Locked On Islanders podcast. It's always great to talk a little Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. Lots to discuss on today's show, and the big news. Well, the first piece of big news, the Islanders have released their preliminary training camp roster. And I am excited about that. They updated the roster ahead of training camp, and it is just good to see that we're getting closer to, seeing training camp. And look, I can go over the list, but there are some surprises here. So among the forwards, and this is alphabetical: Matthew Barzal, Casey Cizikas, Anthony Duclair, William Dufour, Pierre Engvall, Hudson Fasching, Mark Gatcomb, Julian Gauthier, Simon Holmstrom, Bo Horvat, Alex Jeffries, Dylan Kufler, Anders Lee, Eetu Liukas, Kyle McLean, Matthew Maggio, Brock Nelson, Jesse Nurmi, J.G. Pajot, Kyle Palmieri, Camden Thiesing, Tice Thompson, Maxim Siplakov, that's a big one, and Oliver Wahlstrom. Among defensemen, Samuel Bolduc, Dennis Cholowski, Noah Dobson, Aiden Fulp, Isaiah George, Grant Hutton, Scott Mayfield, Travis Mitchell, Callie Odelius, Adam Pelech, Jesse Pulkkinen, Ryan Pollock, Mike Riley, Alexander Romanov, and Marshall Warren. The goalies, Marcus Hogberg, Tristan Lennox, Ilya Sorokin, Henrik Tikkanen, Semyon Varlamov. And, it's just exciting to see, these guys ready and on a roster where we're really going to see what the 2024-2025 Islanders roster is likely to look like. And here's some of the surprises and maybe some of the pros and cons of this roster. First of all, the one thing we note, and we note it right away, there is no Cole Yzerman on this list, no Kamil Bednarik on this list, and no Danny Nelson, no Quinn Finley. So these are some of your top draft picks from the last 2 years. And the reason they're not going to be there, they're in college. And again, because the New York Islanders are the only NHL team that does not hold a prospects camp over the summer, college players will not be able to attend this brief rookie camp that is going to start before training camp opens up for veterans. It's what, 2-3 days now. There is no official start date yet that has been announced for Islanders training camp this year. We are likely looking at sometime between September 10th and 15th, but that is my estimate. I'm not going to say it is official. I still do not like the fact that the Islanders do not hold a prospects camp over the summer that would allow some of these picks who are playing college hockey to get a little NHL exposure, even if it's just to get a little work in front of NHL coaches and to be coached by NHL coaches. To me, that is a big problem, and it's something that the Islanders should change and should address. We still don't have numbers for all of the players. So Maxim Siplakov, for example, no number now in Russia in the KHL. He wore number 9. Guess what? Not happening. That's Clark Gillies' number. It's retired. Anthony Duclair, he wore number 10. That's Simon Holmstrom's number. Now, could Duclair buy it from Holmstrom, or could Holmstrom give it to him? We don't know. As of right now, no number there. The only draft pick from this year who appears on this roster is Pulkkinen, the second-round pick. And if you want to hear more about him, listen to the Monday episode, which I did with Hadi Kalakesh of Locked On NHL Prospects, talking about Cole Yzerman and Danny Nelson and Kamil Bednarik and Pulkkinen. So, breaking down every player in this year's draft plus some of the top prospects. But again, any college player is not going to be able to attend. Alex Jeffries, who finished the season playing 12 games in Bridgeport, 4th-round pick from back in 2020, he will be making his first training camp appearance. Yessi Nurmi, a 4th-round pick from a year ago, is on the roster now. He's going to be playing in the Ontario Hockey League in juniors for the London Knights, but good to have him in training camp. And oh yes, Long Island native Marshall Warren, who I mentioned, he left Michigan University of last year. He will be in training camp. Good to always have those Long Island natives. Jakub Skarek, not on the public roster, but is on the roster for the media site. So he will be the goalie from Bridgeport last couple of years. He will be most likely on the actual training camp roster, as will Liam Foudy and Eric Karlstrom. Both of those guys signed, most likely going to start the season in Bridgeport, but they are on the media roster, but not on the training camp roster. Now, again, this is not official, but it was posted, and good to see that we are getting closer and closer to the start of the upcoming hockey season, and I can't wait. To me, it is exciting, and I just, am eager to get the players into camp and see what this team is going to look like on the ice and begin the competition. And obviously, at this stage, you want to know what you have in Maxim Siplakov. You want to see your William Dufours and your Matthew Maggios and your Alex Jeffries. You want to see those younger guys get a chance. And Pulkkinen, you want to see them make that first impression. And I am looking forward very much to seeing how these guys look in an Islanders uniform, in training camp, in preseason games. And quite honestly, we are less than a month away from the start of Islanders training camp. So when I saw that this roster had been published, I was very excited as we get closer and closer to the return of Islanders hockey. We have got more to get to on today's show. We talked about Patrik Laine a lot this offseason. Well, he was finally traded, obviously not to the New York Islanders. He is now a Montreal Canadian. We're going to talk about why the Islanders could not make a deal realistically for Laine, plus a little more news about Thomas Hickey of the Islanders broadcast team. And for our Islanders birthday of the day, I'll make this easy. The goalie who backstopped the Islanders to their long playoff run in 1993 and then won a Stanley Cup with the Rangers the following year. He's our Islanders birthday of the day. Pretty easy one. Let's see if you can guess who that is. We've got that and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. You can use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of Locked On Islanders will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy Locked On NHL. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Patrik Laine deal has been completed. He is no longer a Columbus Blue Jacket. He is staying in the Eastern Conference, though. He is now a member of the Montreal Canadiens. And look, Montreal needed some offense, just like the Islanders needed some offense. The Blue Jackets trade Laine and a 2026 second-round pick to Montreal, and they get back Jordan Harris, a young player with some upside. And here's the deal. The Blue Jackets didn't get a lot in return, but they did not retain any salary on Patrik Laine. And so, in a sense, this is a win-win. The Blue Jackets get rid of a player who didn't want to be there. They don't have to keep any of his salary. They get a young player who could, continue to develop in exchange. Montreal takes a chance on Laine. They're only committed to him for this year and the following season. So it's not like if things don't work out, they're on the hook forever. Not long term. If things do work out, they would have the inside track of signing him. And when you first look at this deal, and I saw on social media a lot of Islander fans saying, my gosh, if that's all it took to get Patrik Laine, why didn't the Islanders pull the trigger on this deal? Now, I'm going to take out of the equation right now questions about whether Patrik Laine would be good for the Islanders, a good fit. Again, it is a gamble based on Laine's injury history, some of the off-ice issues he's had, and some of the his career trajectory. It is a bit of a gamble by the Canadiens. No question. The reason that the Islanders really couldn't be in on this deal or a similar deal is this. Columbus made a point that they didn't want to hold on to salary. So if they weren't going to take salary, the Islanders needed to free up a lot of cap space in order to sign Patrik Laine. And that's a problem because the Islanders don't have that cap space. So Laine has a cap hit of $8.7 million. Okay. The Islanders, as we know right now, are over the cap. Even if it would have only taken, let's say, a second round pick and Oliver Wahlstrom, and I'm making this up, but let's say that's roughly the equivalent of what the Canadiens, gave to Columbus in order to get Patrik Laine. In order to fit the $8.7 million under the cap, the Islanders would have had to have traded Anders Lee and Simon Holmstrom, let's say, for Laine. And even if it's a three-way deal, even if it's a separate deal, the bottom line is that even Anders Lee, with his $7 million contract, wouldn't be enough off the books for the New York Islanders to be able to afford Patrik Laine under the cap. And the bottom line becomes this. The salary cap mess that Lou Lamoriello has created with this team prevents him from being able to make moves like acquiring Laine. And again, I'm not saying Patrik Laine was the guy that the Islanders needed. And again, $8.7 million is a big cap hit for a guy who has missed a lot of time and who has been inconsistent. But again, whether it's Laine or another player who is similarly situated, the idea of having a player, having the flexibility to make moves to improve your team, you need a little bit more cap space than what the Islanders have. And when you think about Anders Lee, J.G. Pageau, guys who, as much as I like them as people and like them as players, they are not worth the amount of, their production does not match their cap hit. These are players who are on the wrong side of 30, who are clearly past their prime right now. So if anything, the arrow is most likely pointed down. It's not, they could rebound maybe for one season, maybe not. But again, these are guys whose best days statistically are most likely behind them. And while they are important players and play roles on the Islanders, the value you're getting on your cap is not there. And there are too many guys on this roster who fit that description, who also have full no trade clauses, partial no trade clauses, contracts that would be difficult to move. All of those factors, again, it comes back to this. While certain moves Lou Lamoriello has made, getting Duclair, signing Siplakov, these are good moves, value moves that, made sense financially. What they aren't, you don't have the flexibility at this point to make a big move like adding a player with a cap hit like Patrik Laine or some other offensive, top six goal scoring forward with a little speed who might be able to take this team a step closer from being a fringe playoff team to being a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. And that lack of flexibility, the fact that as of right now, the Islanders still can't fill in a 23-man roster under the cap, is really a problem. And look, now the Canadiens are $2 million over the cap, according to Puckpedia. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to find a way and make a move to be cap compliant by the time the season starts. And again, taking a gamble. And another difference between the Islanders and the Canadiens have a much younger roster with more up and coming players. And if you look at it, they have this coming year 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, 3 thirds, 2 second-round picks in 2026, and their first and third. And again, this is a team that is kind of building and improving, whereas the Islanders' older roster not heading necessarily in that direction, where there are not a lot of NHL-ready prospects on the island, where the Canadiens, who probably will not have as good of a record as the Islanders this year, but in 2 or 3 years, probably will be in better shape than the New York Islanders. All right, we have got a lot more to get to on today's show. Little news about broadcaster Thomas Hickey. He may have a new opportunity, but that doesn't necessarily mean he'll leave MSG. We'll talk about that. We'll have our Islanders birthday of the day, all that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. So, all you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel. Again, FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Check it out. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends. We're providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NHL in the description, so you don't need to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So some news on Thomas Hickey, and I wanted to address this. Hickey, who has been a great addition to the Islanders broadcast team over the last couple of years, he now may have another gig ahead. Jonah Siegel basically announced, he's a sports media analyst, and he said that Hickey and play-by-play man John Forsland are close to being named. They have not officially been named, but they are close to being named the broadcasters for Amazon Prime's Monday Night Hockey, which will have regular season games being streamed exclusively on Prime Video in Canada. So the first broadcast is October 14th. It's the Canadiens and the Penguins. There are 26 games set. None of those will involve the Islanders. Now, it's not official yet, but according to the source, it's looking good. Studio hosts to be determined. What this would do for Hickey, that would give him color commentary experience. And look, it doesn't mean he will not be able to do Islanders broadcasts on MSG. I think it'll be a situation very much like what we have seen with Brendan Burke, where Burke, he does TNT broadcasts, and in those situations, there's a conflict. If the Islanders are playing the same night, Well, then, Alan Furing came in and filled in for Burke. Right now, Matt Molson is filled in for Hickey, or, uh, you know, sometimes Shannon Hogan can just do solo as far as the pregame and in between period stuff. But it is a great opportunity, and I certainly wish Thomas Hickey luck. And I hope that he remains with the New York Islanders because he's been a great part of the team's broadcast, and really don't want to lose him all that quickly. But good luck to Thomas Hickey. Really doing a great job, and I'd love to see what he could do in an analyst role given the opportunity. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day, and we're a couple of days early, but Friday will be the 62nd birthday of former Islanders goalie Glenn Healy. Healy, 5'10", 183 pounds, a native of Ajax, Ontario, undrafted, spent 4 seasons at Western Michigan University, made his NHL debut in 1985-86 for the LA Kings, played some AHL hockey for the New Haven Nighthawks, joined the Islanders in 1989-90, stayed with the team through the 92-93 season, was the goalie behind that long playoff run to the conference final in 1993, and then left the Islanders as a free agent, signed with the Rangers, was the backup to Mike Richter for the Rangers, 1994 Stanley Cup win. Stayed with the Rangers through 96-97, then played for the Maple Leafs before hanging up his skates after the 2000-2001 season. Healy, always popular with the Islander fans, had a nice little feature on Islanders broadcast with Patrick Flatley called Heels and Flats. That was always very popular and very funny. Glenn Healy, just a solid goaltender for the Islanders. We'll remember maybe his most magic moment, May 14th, 1993, at the old Civic Arena in Pittsburgh, the Igloo, Game 7 of the Patrick Division Finals, the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins and the New York Islanders. Obviously, Glenn Healy, the goalie for the Islanders, Tom Barrasso, the netminder for the Penguins. And, the Islanders were outshot in this game by a total of 45-20. But the strong goaltending of Glenn Healy kept them in this game. It ended up, the Islanders in the third period at one point were up 3-1, gave up 2 goals in the final 4 minutes, one by Ron Francis, one by Rick Tocchet. It goes to overtime, and David Volek of the Islanders scores the overtime game winner from Ray Ferraro and Dennis Vasky in this game. 42 saves for Glenn Healy against the likes of Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, Kevin Stevens, Martin Straka, Rick Tocchet. This was a loaded Pittsburgh Penguins team, and if it wasn't for the heroics of Glenn Healy, no way the Islanders pull off the upset and move on to the conference final by this big Game 7 road win, courtesy of Glenn Healy. Glenn Healy is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, we'll be back on Friday with the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings as we get closer and closer to training camp. Can't wait. It is just, I can feel it, especially as a little cooler yesterday on Long Island. And so you sort of get that hockey feeling in the air. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.